Welcome back to Before You Vote. Joining me now is Democrat candidate for Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk, first of all, big, broad question. What uniquely qualifies you for this position?
Well, there are several qualifications that I have, many of which no potential Secretary of State's ever had. I'm a former county recorder. We've never had one in that office, and the county recorders, as you know, are the registrars of voters. I have a serious certification from Auburn University in the Election Center. I'm a certified election and registration administrator. I'm an attorney. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I've served in an executive elected office before, which is very different than other types of offices, judicial or legislative. And I really have a passion for making sure that every eligible voter gets a chance to vote regardless of their political party. And I've proven my integrity and honor in that role before, and I want to make sure that we just call balls and strikes in the Secretary's office.
And I want to get to that in a moment, but I want to go back to another issue that in Arizona we don't have a lieutenant governor, which means you are first in line. If the governor doesn't fulfill her term, which it's going to be, they're going to have a woman as a governor, you step into that role. Sure. Talk about that, the potential of that happening. What qualifies you for that role as well?
Well, I'm an Arizona native, and as an attorney here in the state, I understand sort of a lot of what the processes and procedures look like. And again, I've served in an executive office. At the county recorder's office, we actually have 5 different budgets, one of which operates on a 2-year cycle. So understanding the interplay in an executive office between how different departments are supposed to work. Obviously, it's not the governor of the entire state where there's a lot more at stake, but not just being sort of a horse trader on the House floor, but actually having to stand and be accountable for your decisions, being the one person who's making those decisions. That uniquely qualifies me among all of the candidates for this office.
So Arizona, 2020 election, Maricopa County, you were in the center of that storm. What we hear from people on both sides of the aisle is voting should be easy. It should be easy to vote.
Yep.
Should be hard to cheat.
Yep.
Do you believe we have achieved that completely, or do you think there's still improvements that can be made?
Well, I don't just believe it. We've proven it, and we can still make improvements. You know, between 2016 and 2020, Maricopa County made it so easy to vote that we had over 600,000 more ballots cast. That's an enormous amount of growth, even during a global pandemic. And we did it by creating vote centers where anyone could vote anywhere. We really increased our communication to show folks how easy early voting by mail can be and how secure it is. And the ballot tracking system that I put into place, where you get that automatic text or email when your ballot's coming to you, and like a receipt when you get it back to the election department, we notify you. That's the kind of security and confidence that folks grew to know under my administration at the county. We can do that across all of Arizona. So those are some of the improvements that we can make in some of these systems that are already really, really good.
So in 2016, there were questions about from Hillary Clinton's campaign. We know what happened in 2020 with people with Donald Trump questioning the validity of the vote.
Sure.
Do you think it's possible to quell the concerns of some voters? Or do you think there's just going to be some people, if they lose, they're just going to say that it was stolen?
Look, it's not just possible, it's necessary, because as I've stated before, elections are the golden thread that hold the fabric of our society together. If you pull that thread out, everything disintegrates. We need that predictability, that reasonableness in this office. We need to be able to say, look, winners win, losers lose, try again later. But importantly, this matters not just for elections. That has an impact in business. It has an impact in industry, in trade, in commerce, in music, in law, in the arts, in education. All sectors of our society depend on sort of this predictable pulse so that we can continue with our civilized government. And the wild-eyed fanaticism that we see coming from some people who are just like, no, it never ends. This grievance is the only thing that exists. That's a problem, and that gets in the way of progress. It gets in the way of business. It gets in the way of industry and all the others that I mentioned. We've got to have folks who are willing to just say, hey, we're calling balls and strikes here. You can trust it because it's regular people that are actually running the elections, and then let's just move on. So I think folks are ready to move away from that 2020 debate and move into some normalcy again.
So let's talk about recent legislation that was passed that's being challenged, and it's being challenged. It's voter ID. It's having to prove citizenship to register to vote, even in federal elections. There is a challenge, and if it does stay in place, it won't go into effect until 2023,
sure,
which would affect your office. Where do you stand on needing to provide ID in order to register to vote? What do you think of that position?
Well, I think the legislation is short-sighted, and I think it's wrong-headed, because we already have an enormous amount of data that's available that can actually prove to us who is the authentic voter. with an authentic voter registration program, we could go to not just Citizenship and Immigration Services, vital records, the Social Security death match, change of address. We integrated all of these databases that we already have. We could have a list of who is eligible to vote already without adding that extra burden onto the individual. And some people say, well, it's not a burden. It is a burden. Some people have a hard time finding those documents. That's an easy thing to understand. But as government already has this information, why can't we just integrate all that information, say this is our list of authentic voters. If they choose to vote, they vote. And if they don't choose to vote, they don't vote. We can already do that. But we're still looking at these sort of 18th century solutions to 21st century issues. And I think we just need to be a little more creative. And that comes from an understanding of the systems that a lot of folks just don't have, because they're not paying attention to what systems have for us to benefit from. And so I don't think that current legislation is really that big of a deal. It will impact some folks, and it will impact some folks disproportionately. That's unfortunate. But I think it's short-sighted because it doesn't address the real issue. And the real issue is this. We're still operating over here in the 18th century. We need to bring government up to speed, be more efficient, more technologically advanced, more using the information that we already have so that it's more convenient and more secure and more accountable for our voters.
So I think I know the answer to this question, but let me finish with this question. There is a push to go to paper ballots, no voting machines, and getting the results in within 24 hours. If a piece of legislation like that were to pass, what does that do to your office?
Well, we have all paper ballots in Arizona, so whoever's saying we need all paper ballots doesn't know what they're talking about. B, we don't have voting machines in Arizona because we have all paper ballots. And so whoever's proposing that specific set that you're talking about is ignorant of the certain circumstances that we have. And the last point is this. Human hand counting is less accurate than using the technology that we already have. Nobody who is serious about election administration believes that hand counting is better. But there are conspiracy theorists who have this industry of grievance that they continue to promote, who does think hand counting is better. Have we become more efficient? I will give kudos to the current county recorder. The votes are coming in a lot faster here in Maricopa County and therefore statewide. So they are making improvements where improvements can be made, but all of the rest of this stuff is just hooey. And we've got to get past the conspiracy theories, and we have to have actual informed policymakers making our policies instead of just this radical stuff like, seriously, we already have all paper ballots in Arizona. That's the law. Some of these folks actually ought to read the law before they make their commentary.
Time flies. I appreciate you coming.